Well, we wrapped up E3 of this year in 2017, and for the most part, the big three, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, they all pretty much had good enough conferences, right? A lot of people liked one or the other out of the three, and really no one embarrassed themselves badly, so that's great. I'm, of course, not referring to EA, for example, where we had some pretty cringy moments, but otherwise, it went over pretty well. And really, if you look at Sony right now, they are pretty much on a power high. They're refusing crossplay, and that's because they don't need to do it. But there was a time where the infallible Sony didn't have the best conference. In fact, they were pretty much put themselves in kind of a bind during this time. This, of course, was E3 2006. Not only were they coming off of the high of the PS2, but they were also announcing a system that really shocked a lot of people, specifically with its pricing and limited options in terms of like a cheaper price point to come in under. So I figure we take a look at when Sony was really their most vulnerable and put on a pretty embarrassing show if you look back on it today. This is Sony E3 2006. So they do the absolute correct thing to get started. They talk about their success with the PS2. The PS2 was not the strongest unit. It was lagged behind the GameCube and the Xbox, especially the Xbox, by a great deal in terms of graphical power, but that didn't matter because it had a significant amount of games, especially with the Japanese market. There were some great RPGs on the PS2 that really catered to that audience, and when they showed the graph of how many they've really sold through, where there were 23 million in Japan, 41 in North America, and then of course their battleground they always win over in Europe, they had over 100 million PS2s sold at this time, and that is massive for their financial standpoints. They were basically at this point thinking, I guess, that they were untouchable. They could pretty much do anything, and they really tested it here this E3. Now, of course, before you introduce any game system that's going to shape the world with its technology, you have to introduce it with an awesome sizzle reel, one that really makes you think and try to figure out what this system could do.
In a game.
Come on! I'm gonna beat you, and it's gonna hurt because I don't know.
Yes, that was really played before the PlayStation 3 made its appearance on stage. I have no idea what they were thinking here. It seems like they show people mashing on controllers and kind of waving it around. Maybe they got to play with the 6-axis. It seems odd. If you looked at this without having any kind of context, you would probably not know it was for a video game system. And what's with the guy at the end? I mean, it's clearly nighttime here. It's almost like they wandered down Main Street at 1 a.m. looking for the only person they could find that would talk to the camera, and they wound up with somebody who I assume was just a village drunk walking down the street. Maybe Sony, maybe next time, get the drunks at 1 p.m. I think they talk a little faster.
I don't know.
Now, they go over all the features of the PS3, right? It includes an internal hard drive, which was a big deal at the time because the 360 had external hard drives that attached through the top, right? It was kind of like you could buy one without a hard drive and then maybe buy memory sticks or an expensive hard drive down the road. Let's face it, a 20 gig hard drive at $100, that's a ripoff. Let's be realistic here. And at this point, Sony was like, well, let's just put everything into it and let them buy it so we don't have to sell them accessories down the road that really would nickel and dime them. And that was a great strategy for them, except the pricing was pretty high. So they go through as many of the features as they can, pretty much going all the way down to it being able to use USB, memory sticks, SD, and compact flash. All of those pretty much were removed down the road, especially the memory stick from the PSP. No less, they do try to put all of that over. Now, this was feature-packed, and it made a lot of sense now, but at the time, they came on stage and gave us this price.
On November 17th, 2006, the 20 gigabyte PlayStation 3 will retail for $499 US and 549 Canadian dollars. And the 60 gigabyte PlayStation 3 for $599 US, $659 Canadian. PlayStation 3 will be available in Europe and Australasia on November 17th, 2006. We will sell the 20 gigabyte PlayStation 3 for 499 euros and the 60 gigabyte PlayStation 3 for 599 euros, including VAT.
Good thing they muted the crowd after that one. The applause would have been astronomical if they hadn't. $600 was much harder to swallow back in 2006. I mean, now the Xbox One X gets flack for being $500. I mean, back then, people lost their mind over the PS3 being $600. It still sold well when it came out, but obviously the pricing was a big concern for a lot of people who wanted to jump into the next generation of PlayStation consoles. This is another weird choice by Sony to show off Gran Turismo HD, which is essentially a PS2 game that they upscaled to 1080p just to show off on the PS3. It really didn't do any justice to the PS3, and it was like the first thing that they showed for the system. Seemed very odd to do that.
So, Richard, what do we have here for today?
Phil, today we have the Eye of Judgment, and it's a game developed by our Japan studio, and I have the honor of showing it today here. And I'll just get started.
Yeah, do you remember Eye of Judgment? If you don't remember, don't worry. It didn't last very long. The concept was interesting, but you relied on a camera that wasn't the best at recognizing the cards, and the games took forever because you had to make sure the camera recognized every card you played. They released a few sets of cards, and then later canceled future plans for a complete collection of the game. That's right, there was originally a plan in place to release decks upon decks of this game, and booster packs, and cards, and a special edition that came with a whole pack. They scrapped that almost immediately because this did not take off, and really, they just tried to get a little in over their heads to create an entire new card game based around the iToy.
And I'll place another card here, move this one back a little bit. Place this one in here. Oops, wait for it to instantiate. Yeah, so.
They go on to show us the PSP running PS1 games, and they seem to think that people were going to stand up and go crazy and cheer, and it was going to be a big victory moment for them, but after the initial announcement, maybe 3 people cheer, and then for some reason, he has the idea of saying the thing again more like the announcer would.
It's Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer! Remember that one?
I feel like in his mind leading up to this event, this is how it was supposed to go.
It's Ridge Racer. Whoops.
I'm sorry, what? Why did he even say whoops? No one knows what's going on under that desk. I mean, for all we know, he could have been pulling a police academy, and maybe he just hit the girl in the head by accident just now.
Whoops.
So next up, a game from Japan, which is being developed by Game Republic, a company which is run by the legendary creator Yoshiki Okamoto. And here to demonstrate the game for us is Bill Rich, the executive producer of Genji 2.
Being based on history, the stages of the game will also be based on famous battles which actually took place in ancient Japan.
Hey, this looks promising. A game based on ancient Japan with real historical battles. This could be a lot of fun.
So here's this giant enemy crab. I'll switch over to Yoshitsune, hop on its stomach, and you attack its weak point for massive damage. So you'll be able to find all these new different ways of playing the game.
Yep, that's right, guys. They were battling giant crabs in ancient Japan. This is probably from the same history books where George Washington fought chiefs while crossing the Delaware River, or soldiers warding off creepers while storming the beaches of Normandy. You know, actual history.
Whoops. Ken, it would be a pleasure to share with everybody what this controller can do. Now, this is obviously a very familiar controller in terms of shape and size, but it's not what it looks like, it's what it does. So let's switch to the demo. And clearly, a little secret is waiting to be unveiled. Now,
Was there a better way to really introduce the 6-axis, the failed 6-axis, than to have a construction crew really not time everything correctly and hold the whole thing up and have them kind of stand there looking around? No, that's perfect, because the 6-axis, while Sony at least had an idea with it, didn't do well. And it was really funny because leading up to the event, 2006 here for E3, there were a lot of gamers who were like, well, Sony's going to show us a true gaming console, no motion controls. Nintendo and the Wii, they can have the motion controls, but people here playing Sony's console and Microsoft's console, we're not going to get into that at all.
Never mind. I guess this was the easiest way to play this game. I mean, look at the control he has on the left. Everything loops upside down. Barely any movements to make any of those happen. It's odd that Sony decided to even show this or pursue this, considering they dropped this and went to the Move control, and even just took this completely out of controllers a few years later. It really didn't last long at all.
This is definitely the E3 that most people make fun of because it's easy to. I mean, there's so much stuff there that's just weird and crazy and just out there, right? Mistakes happening on stage with various different people all at once. But if you really go back and look at this E3, it wasn't all bad. There were some good games shown off there. I mean, we saw Metal Gear Solid 4. We saw Final Fantasy 13. Resistance was there. There were some good games shown off. It's just those big low points that people point out just really drown out a lot of the good in this conference. But that's E3 2006 for Sony. I hope you guys enjoyed this look back at a very odd conference that took place. The big price point of the PlayStation 3 and just some of the terrible on-stage antics really sealed this for a lot of people to be a very meme-worthy, I guess you could say, E3 here. I mean, the giant crab. Who's ever going to forget that? Apparently no one. They've put that online as one of the best memes from E3. But that's it for now, guys. I'll see you next time.